Mendelssohn is perhaps best known for his wedding march. Would you say that Elijah is equally deserving of fame?
I would say it's far more deserving of fame. The thing about Elijah is it's possibly and probably the greatest oratorio of the 19th century by anyone. So just on that level, on its own, it's got to be worth listening to and worth hearing, quite definitely. The thing about Mendelssohn is he was probably one of the greatest child prodigies who's ever lived. And although this is a mature work, it still has aspects which are quite extraordinarily brilliant in terms of its originality and so much of the substance of the piece. It's quite extraordinary.
How relevant to today's audiences is a Victorian oratorio about the waywardness of the early Jewish people?
Well, I think the way to look at it is that if we think about religious tension, today it's as relevant as it's always been. One only has to think of the current crisis in the Middle East, or even you could take, for example, parts of the United States where you have such a tension between the Bible belters on the one hand and the urban liberals on another. We are surrounded by religious tension at all times, and it's, if anything, becoming more relevant rather than less.
What can someone expect who isn't familiar with Elijah?
If you're expecting a traditional oratorio like the Messiah, this is by its very nature much more dramatic. It's much closer to opera in many ways. There's a rollicking good story, great tunes, massive contrasts, huge amount of genuine drama which is portrayed purely musically, but should, in a good performance, come flooding right into the audience's experience, and it should be really very exciting.
Tell me a little bit about the soloists. I believe there are one or two names that might be familiar to our regular concert goers.
Indeed, we have the wonderful South African soprano Erica Elof coming to sing, and she's just sung the piece actually on the South Bank in the last couple of weeks, so she knows it well and is singing at the top of her form. The bass who sang in the Verdi Requiem in Winchester Cathedral last year, Ashley Riches, is singing the part of Elijah. I think it will be the first time he's ever sung the role, but he's always wanted to sing it, so he's very excited about doing that. And then we have a tenor, Ben Thapper, who was a member of G4, which some people may know. And we have a delightful new mezzo who I've recently come across, who's young and very talented, Kate Simmons-Joy, and I think it's going to be a very strong team.
Why are we singing Elijah?
Well, I see Elijah as one of the four cornerstones of the choral repertoire. If you think of the most frequently performed pieces, Messiah would be one, the Verdi Requiem would perhaps be another. I see Elijah and maybe Elgar's Dream of Gerontius as the four principal works that are most sung by choirs of this sort. And one of the things about Mendelssohn is that he was, in his 10 visits to this country, he was an immensely popular composer and just adored in this country, because we were crying out for somebody to write music of this sort, for the wonderful tradition of amateur singing that there is, and there was, particularly in the 19th century. Every town, every city had these large amateur choirs who were just searching for exciting music to sing, and Mendelssohn was able to provide that. And I think it's really good that that tradition has been maintained so strongly.
What are the most challenging aspects for the choir, for the orchestra, or for you as conductor?
Well, for the choir, the extraordinary thing about this piece is that it is required to be so dramatic and so intense, and sometimes really quite bloodthirsty, and other times sublimely lyrical and calm, and it has to switch very often from one to the other very quickly, and often in 8 parts as well, so there are considerable challenges for any chorus. For the orchestra, I would say that the principal challenge for them is the fact that they have to accompany lots of different things and different styles with great subtlety, huge, wide dynamic range, but all within the context of a very rich, romantic orchestration, which can sometimes take quite a lot of balancing. Mm-hmm. And as for the conducting, Well, it's a bit like conducting an opera. You have to have a concept of the whole piece. You have to have an overview in your mind all the time. Even though you're concentrating on individual movements at any one time, your pacing of the whole piece, you're keeping the structure in your head all the time.